Okay, have you ever had those times where you're like, man, I think God just might have spoken to me right now? I think we've all probably had times like that. But then have you had other times where you're like, I would bet my life on the fact that God just spoke something to me or revealed something to me? Well, that is what happened about 4 years ago with a word that I just believe that the Lord gave me in regards to starting some sort of discipleship training school to be able to help people in their faith. And I kind of want to share, why I believe that God has given me personally that revelation and whatnot. So when I started following Jesus, this was about 10 years ago. In January, it's going to be 10 years. And when I started following him, the first thing that I had a revelation of was that there was something seriously wrong with the state of the church. I was too naive. There was nobody in my church group, fellowship, or whatever that was kind of having that same revelation. And I was like, man, I really want to be part of the change here. And the first thing is going to start with me and me looking more like Jesus and not living in this habitual sin that I'm living in. At the time, it was pornography. And it was also part of seeing the issue with the church not doing the things they were commanded to do. So there's things like don't watch porn and stuff like that. But there's also, we almost always talk in the church about the defensive things, but we almost never talk about the offensive things that Jesus has called us to. He has called us to preach the gospel. He has called us to disciple people. He has called us to be a disciple. He has called us to meet the needs of the lost. And especially for the offensive things, it's kind of like 3 layers I see. It's first off is we come to Jesus and then start pruning out the obvious sins in our life, the really, things that made us the old us. And then after that, we start doing some of those defensive structures, which is kind of part 2. Phase 2 is, you start saying hey, I'm not going to do this sin. I'm not going to do that sin. I recognize that I have a temper problem. And you cut those things. And then the third stage, quote unquote, of Christianity is where you start doing offensive things. That's usually how I see people's Christian evolution go. And I realize almost nobody's going to round 3. They might not even be doing round 2, let alone round 3. Very few Christians am I seeing reading their Bible on a daily basis, spending time on their knees in prayer frequently. And I'm like, whoa, how are we supposed to expect that you guys are doing well spiritually at all if you're not even doing the simple fundamental things that the Bible is teaching you to do? And that was something that was horribly concerning to me. So now you fast forward to, seeing let's say, really the Hebrews 6, where it says, let us lay aside the elementary principles and teachings of the faith and let's press on to maturity and not lay again a foundation of repentance towards dead works, faith towards God, washing, laying on of hands, baptism, and eternal judgment. Let us press on to those things, from those things, which are the foundational things, and let's press on to maturity in Christ. And I'm like, whoa. But people aren't even reading their Bible daily. They don't even know what the truth is, right? Hosea 6:4 says, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And I'm seeing people demolished almost on a daily basis because they don't even know what it looks like to properly follow Jesus well, because they don't know what the word says about following Jesus well. And I was like, wow, people need somebody to hold their hands through this so that they can really train, educate, and equip them in making sure that they're doing this thing the right way, because currently they're not. And I'm seeing people just get just destroyed left and right because they don't even know what the word says. Whenever the enemy comes to attack them, they just get attacked and just have to deal with the attacks. And it's horrible. So I was like, no, we need to do something about this in the church. And it looks like probably holding somebody's hands through that, teaching them what that looks like verbally, in a classroom section or a church way, right? The ways that we do it in churches today. And then on top of that, we're going to go into a deep dive of, exempling that, showing that as an example. And then finally, we're going to ask them to do that themselves. And then later I found out there's a word for this in the Bible, and it's called discipleship. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay, that's awesome. No wonder Jesus did it right the first time with 12 dudes. And when I saw that, I was like, that is the thing that we're missing. Because there are some people who are reading the word. There are some people who are spending time with Jesus. There are some people who give money to the homeless, right? But at large, when we're looking at just a broad, term kind of, are we actually showing people what it looks like to represent Jesus well on a daily basis? The revelation to that was, no, we're not. And that's really what the pivot I want the point of this channel to be, is to start showing people what it looks like for me in my daily walk. Right now I'm in my kids' playroom, and that's intentional. And the reason I'm in my kids' playroom is I want to show that Part of every day walking with Jesus and following Jesus looks like sometimes you're just going to like be playing with your kids with all the toys that are on the floor. And sometimes that looks like cleaning up and being faithful towards loving your wife well. Sometimes that looks like us as Christians going, when we go to the grocery store later today, that we talk to the guy that's the clerk about Jesus and ask him if he needs prayer for anything. Sometimes that means that when we go to the bank to deposit a check, that the person behind the register or the bank teller needs to know about the Lord. And then you get his phone number, and then you get dinner with him the next day, and then you start discipling him from there on out. And I really just want to take people through a snapshot of my life and how I do that every single day. And what does this all have to do with this 12-month ministry school? Well, believe it or not, it has everything to do with the 12-month ministry school. And here's why. We all know the things to do as Christians, right? We don't want to sound like for a second that this 12-month ministry school that we're going to start, which we haven't even started it yet, to be transparent, but everybody knows the thing to do. If I was like, hey, you're obese and you need to get in shape, there's not an obese person on the planet who doesn't know what to do. They might not know everything about caloric deficits. They might not know everything about keto and how glucose affects the bloodstream. They might not know all of these things, but they know if I go to the gym and I eat salads more than I eat cupcakes, it'll probably be a benefit to me. Similarly, we know as Christians, if I read my Bible more, if I pray more, if I do the things that God has told me more, that's probably better for me. So we don't want to seem at all like we're being gatekeeping. I know some different ministries and organizations, and they act like they have that secret sauce, and once you join there, we're not that way at all. We're just teaching the same things that the Bible teach. But the goal is to disciple the people that we're talking to in the same ways that the Bible tells us to do already anyways. Christianity is us as Christians holding hands with somebody else who's a student, showing them what it looks like, and then at the very end of your relationship together, as I said, first off, it's teaching, educating in a classroom like type way. The second is showing them how to do the thing that you just taught them. And then the third thing is then doing it with them so that they can learn how to do it themselves. And then the last piece of that, which is the most exciting part, which is Acts 14, 15, somewhere in that area, is the Church of Antioch. Antioch was a place where they would bring people in, they would disciple those people for a period of time, and then they would send them out all across the world so that they could go do the work of the ministry. And part of that thing that we're wrestling with right now, we'd love to hear from you all in the comments what your interest would be in this, is if we should do this online or in person. Our interest in doing it online would be that people can do it from the comfort of their own home, wherever they are, and they can be part of it that way. The interest in doing it in person would be that people have a real serious dedication to the thing that they're doing, and they're literally entirely uprooting their life so that they can give their 110% to the thing that's being done here. So, with that being said, we're trying to really decide on which one we want to do like that, but we've seen some issues with some of the ways that this is done currently, which has kind of brought us to the place that we're at of wanting to start something that is new. I'll give you the best example I have of somebody who I think is doing it incredible, but I see a few flaws with, and that is YWAM. Youth with a Mission is a massive organization, 10 billion times bigger than I am, and potentially will ever be with the ministry stuff I do. But what they do really well is they take people for like 5 to 6 months usually, and they bring them for the first 3 months in what's called Discipleship Training School, DTS, and they show them and they equip them. And then for the next 2 to 3 months, they will then send them out to a third world country to actually do the things that they were just equipped in how to do originally. And now for these next months, they have been, they're going in, wherever that is, Africa or somewhere in the Middle East, and then they're actually getting to work out those things. And those things are great. The two big issues I have is, the first one is, if you're just in this place where you travel somewhere, and then the only thing that you're doing all day is living in this Christian utopia, heaven-like circumstance with a bunch of other believers who agree with everything that you say, who encourage you in everything that you do, who love you just like they love themselves, that's amazing, and that's what heaven's going to be like, but that's not real life. You don't get to just not have a job in real life. You don't get to just not have conflict and pressures from family and friends and coworkers. That's not what real life is. That's fake. So people live in this Christian incubator, and then they go and do ministry, and they see all this awesome fruit and everything from what they do, and then they come back home, and here's really the crux of the problem. I know a lot of people who have gone through YWAM, and there's one of two results. They either radically follow Jesus for the rest of their life and look more like Jesus than they ever have before, or they see the shell shock of going back to the real world where they have to get a now boring job, and that kind of leads them to this place of depression. Because remember, they literally were just living in this Christian utopia, and now they have a job they have to do. Now they have responsibilities. Now they have to clean the room. These are all things that were not relevant to them before. And now they have to do all of these things at the same time. And you have to go back to your church. And here's the problem with going back to your church. You get super excited. You're like, oh my gosh, super, super stoked about the stuff that I'm going to do. You go and you do it with everything in you, and you say, Pastor, I learned all the revelations I need to. Church does this wrong. They need to do this different. Worship team needs to look more like this. And again, it's from the purest of heart. You just love them, and you have a revelation that honestly the pastor probably doesn't even have. He laughs you right off that place and says, excuse me, you are not in charge of this place. You're not the one who runs the ship. We know what we do, and it works really well, and you can go and sit down. And then now you're sat in this really difficult place where you've got to make a revelation. Oh, my pastor doesn't seem to be that interested in living as radical as the Bible has taught us to, and like our teammates have taught us to here at YWAM over the past however long. And then it gets really cynical, you get really frustrated, you get really upset, start questioning if this is even legit, wondering why you've got all these liars and fakes and phonies and wolves in sheep's clothing. And I've seen a lot of these people just completely fall away from the faith, which is obviously heartbreaking, but it's a real reality because people were taken out of the real world into this Christian incubator for 6 months. That's a plenty of time to rewire your brain entirely into forgetting what the real world is like because you're not experiencing it ever. And when you come back, it's very hard. And you can't even have a friend to fellowship with now anymore that is on your level of iron sharpening iron. It's like there's nobody. Like the pastor, the pinnacle of your church isn't even there. What makes you think the people under him are going to be there? And again, I have experienced the same feeling to some extent. I haven't been to YWAM. Personally, like attended YWAM as a student. I've been to YWAM, but I've never attended. And I've experienced this still myself. And when I had this revelation, I had the same naive conversations with my pastor and whatnot, and they went very poorly as well. And I didn't, just run away from the faith, obviously. For me, I'm like, I want to be part of the solution. But that's part of the challenge I have with something like what a YWAM does. And again, I honor them and I honor what they do, and they've seen so much fruit from their ministry. But what we want to do here is something where that's not a reality because people are still consuming the same life stuff that they do every single day. They're just dedicating time every single day or every single week, regardless of whether that's online or in person, to seeking Jesus at a deeper level. I'll explain my pros and cons of the online versus doing something in person. But again, I would really much prefer to hear what you guys have to say above what my thoughts are on the topic. Because again, I value what people who would be actually going through the program, those kinds of people would say about something like this. All right, so online. The problem with doing something like this online is you have the consistent problem of online is not real discipleship. Now, I can teach somebody, I can educate, and I can equip them in doing and learning the things to do online. And that's super beneficial, but I wouldn't have the infrastructure to be able to hold your hands through the process personally and doing it with you and then having you do it yourself because I'm not with you. So I don't have that luxury of doing that, which for me, I don't like that aspect of it. So that's one of the challenges of doing something online. Another challenge is it's very easy to hide in sin when you're online because I meet up with you 2-3 times a week or whatever, virtually on a Zoom or whatever. And I hope that gives everything that we need to give for you to be able to be doing well spiritually. And again, I don't have that level of accountability that would be wanted to be done in a real discipleship, model. The other benefit though of doing online is cheaper. I could offer an online discipleship program for much cheaper than an in-person one. Now, either way, we would, if we did it online, we would want some sort of, at the very end of it, like a consummation of that, where we have some sort of in-person event where everyone gets like fly in and like celebrate together and rejoice and, like hand out like, diplomas per se. We would think that would be awesome. But, obviously for something like this, it wouldn't just be me. I would have like, dozens of staff members who would be helping to do something like this. So, there would be a cost incurred to it either way, which is, a double-edged sword as well, I understand. But it's the only way we'd be able to give that high level of help to be able to serve people in the way that we would need to. So that would be one of the things. Again, we could do it for like exponentially cheaper though that way. And so that's one of the benefits of online. The other benefit of online is you get to stay where you already live. So you would get to live in the same place that you are, have the same job that you've always had, and then learn how to integrate being a Christian into where you already are. That's a huge pro that I absolutely love about that model. But the challenges to that as well is sometimes some people need to be removed completely from their environment so that they can be, again, in some sort of not Christian incubator in the same way I mentioned with YWAM, but just out of their circumstances in a different headspace to be able to receive these things that they're wanting to receive. Now, the benefits of online and cons, of in person and the cons of in person. When you do something in person, again, you get everybody there. You can touch and feel, and you can really experience things at a much higher level together. There's the level of community at a greater rate with the people who are all there around there with you, as well as when you're in person like that. you would still have a job. We would still have everyone get a job here in this area, and we would actually help people do that so that they would still be making income. They don't have to worry about, financial goals just going to the wayside. No, you'd still have an income, and that would actually help you pay for the program while you're at the program as well. Again, it'd be way more expensive in person because there'd be way more staff members, and they'd have to physically leave their homes to be there with you. And we'd have to help be part of helping you all with lodging and things like that. So there's just a higher cost to being able to do something in person. But there'd be the real come and see kind of thing. I taught you how to do it. I did it or I showed you how to do it, and then I did it with you so that you could do it on your own. There would be really that level of accountability. We would be able to know if somebody's living in sin. If you needed something at any moment, somebody would be there for you. We would be able to have daily, support with each other, and you'd be able to be around way more people who you'd be able to build real relationship with, as in with the staff members, but also with the other students who are going through the program. And the craziest part about this all is we actually already have the building for this. So I know it might sound like, well, this sounds like a no-brainer or to do both, but we really, really, really want to just focus on one and then really completely perfect the craft of that one and then be able to do the second one at a later point, regardless of which one we start with. But we already have a building that would be perfect for this. I mean, it literally has it's not a church, but it already has a place that could be used with a stage and everything like that. So it would be a perfect equipping center to be able to do something like this. And again, there would be no cost to the building either because of how it's set up. It's really awesome. I can go into that more in a future video if we choose to go that route. But this would be one of the big benefits that we would have as well of doing this kind of model is we wouldn't have to worry about a building, any costs for the building. It would be a place where everyone gets to meet, gather, have worship nights together and stuff like that. And the other thing it does is this gives people an invitation to either make a plant with us where we're located and stay here and become staff one day with us and to be able to now help equip the next group of people, or it allows you to now take everything that you've learned and take it back home to where you were, and you won't have that shell shock because remember, you're already working a job every single week with a bunch of people, around a bunch of people. You're already serving, it's already going to be part of the common integration, and we give those tools already. We already have the book. I don't know if I showed it to you. I'll grab it in a second, but we have a whole book. It's 300 pages long. That's of a workbook to go along with this program. I actually wrote it 2 years ago, and I just knew that this was coming up. And when we thought of doing that, we already had when people go back home, how to equip themselves when they go back home. And then lastly is when you get to do this kind of in-person thing, it allows people to have almost these discipleship Antioch training plants in their local area. So if you've been equipped in how to do it, we'll show you how to start it yourself so that you can now reach your local city or reach the nations and have people come to your local Antioch to be able to bring people in, disciple them, and then send them back out into the world to do the things that God has called them to do as well. So those are kind of the pros and cons of doing both. I really like both ideas. I think both have huge opportunities available to them. And obviously the other challenge with the in-person is with it costing more, that means less people will be able to be part of it, doing it that way. With that being said, again, everybody would actually have a job while they're here, at the very least working part-time, so that they would have some level of funds to be able to reinvest into the program itself so that they'd be able to pay it off while they're here instead of having a lump sum up front. So that would be one of the benefits that would be available for those people. With that being said, let us know in the comments which of these things that you're more interested in, and we're going to go more in the nitty-gritty in these future videos, talking about just the things that we're doing, me and everybody around me are doing kind of on a daily basis to really determine what this is going to look like, how it's going to look, how we're going to strategize it, and you guys just get to be there along with the whole journey. Appreciate you all. Love you all, and subscribe for more.